I am watching every Best Picture winner in order and ranking them to truly determine the question we've all been wanting to know the answer to. Which Best Picture is the Best Picture? So join in, watch along, as we find out who will prevail. Today, we get our New Year's Eve fireworks and prepare to celebrate the turn of the 20th century as we watch 1934's winner, Cavalcade. Cavalcade, directed by Frank Lloyd, follows the story of a 30-year snapshot of the new century through the lives of Robert Marriott, played by Clive Brook, and Jane Marriott, played by Diana Winwood. Through the turn of the century, we see snapshots of things like the Boer War, the Great War, and the Titanic, and how these events formed temptation, trauma, and tribulation for the Marriotts and the Bridges families. You put all that together, sprinkle in some tense moments, and mic drop scenes, and hey, we've got ourselves a movie. Before we get into it, let's pause and have a quick revisionist history check and look at 1934. Plenty of births of athletes and celebrities, the great Bill Russell, Sophia Loren, the great Dame Judi Dench. In notable events, let's start with some positive news. The first Golf US Masters is held at Augusta, a tradition that still stands today. And then how's this first signs of the times to come, and very ominous signs. Hitler stages a purge of the Nazi party named Night of the Long Knives. Also, Mao Zedong and his troops begin the Long March. Also, Sergei Kirov is assassinated, leading to Stalin using that as a main motivator and reason to begin the Great Purge. Not to mention, nuclear warfare began as there were certain patterns going through in science. Just a really crazy time, and looking at this now, you can see what's coming next. Okay, and last thing before we jump into the content, here's how I'll be scoring things. So as you can see on screen now, it'll be popping up for you. I am scoring this in 5 different categories: score or audio, visuals or cinematography, acting, plot, did I like the movie. All out of 20, add that score up, gives me a score out of 100, and then we will rank everything and see if we have enough variety to truly determine who will be number 1 at the end of things. So jumping into it again, like I'm going to say many times, this was interesting, but not necessarily for all the right reasons. What I will say is, the content and the messaging resonated, and it had points to discuss, which made it interesting, but that was really it. There was nothing else that was really remarkable on screen, and if I had to give this movie one word to describe it right now, without spoiling as I go through the rest of it, the word that comes to mind really is unremarkable. In terms of the score, look, some parts of the score really worked and I thought they added great value to scenes, but it wasn't always present, and now that I actually have a fair few movies to compare it to, comparing this to the Grand Hotel score, which was way superior to this one, it really left it in the dust, so in that sense, it didn't really hold up to the rest of the crowd. And again, it didn't necessarily stand up to the crowd when it came to cinematography either. And I don't mean it in a bad way, like, everything that was on screen was safe. Like, if I had to really explain it, I would say there wasn't really any risk taking, which is fine and actually can be really beneficial in a lot of times where potentially directors overdo it, or, you know, the cameras are all over the place or whatever and it can confuse. But in this case, again, if I was to refer back to that unremarkable feeling, it felt too safe. It didn't feel like it was as innovative or creative as some of the things that we've seen already. So in that sense, it wasn't necessarily the best experience from a visuals and audio point of view. And even as I'm doing this review, you know, and I'm thinking about specific content or specific things that I want to share with you about the film, I'm finding it really hard to be specific because that's how it felt whilst watching. Even from an acting standpoint, I really felt that the characters or the actors themselves weren't given the real chance to shine. What I'm not sure about though is whether that was a script decision or an acting decision or potentially a direction of the story. But what I will say is it doesn't really give anyone the floor or the spotlight, and in that sense I was really wishing for more. And that really ties in the sentiment to how I felt about the plot as well. I was just wishing for more complexity, more depth on certain topics. And one thing I will say is, doing a compilation movie like this, and probably being one of the first to do it, I can understand how it was difficult to put all of that together. You know, we go from 1899 into the 1930s, and so obviously montages have been done a lot to death since, or, you know, edited in ways where we can really get context through the years. So I'm not going to knock it for trying the compilation route, but it just didn't hit the way that I think they were hoping for. And for me, yeah, I was longing for more depth and more complexity to certain parts of the story, because some of those events had the opportunities and had the things happen in them that actually allow us to have more complexity in that story. You know, think about the Boer War, think about the Great War. We had All Quiet on the Western Front, did a great bit on that. So yeah, there was definitely opportunity to go further into the events that they chose. The last thing I'll say on this is that I really did appreciate the insight. You know, I've probably spent the last few minutes knocking it a little bit and either talking people off of it, or maybe people are in agreement with how they felt, but really through the last act there was a lot of social commentary around the turn of the century and I guess how the people felt. That's what I'm going to assume that meant. And what I really appreciated or loved to see is that there were so many common themes to the things that we complain about or the things that we protest for in today's age. And it's just so funny in contrast, obviously, what that meant to them in the 1930s or the 1920s versus what that means to us now in the 2020s. And so to see that and actually have the knowledge that we have today and look back on that, I was fascinated by the fact that so many topics were similar and so many of the things that were causing issues for the public then and the people, for lack of a better term, are still the issues that we face today and still the things that we complain about today with the turn of the 21st century. But yeah, look, it's not one I'll rewatch, so if you look on screen now, you'll see my score, and I am giving this one a 39 out of 100. You can see how I've scored the individual categories there. Again, not one I'll rewatch, and also straight after watching Grand Hotel, paled in comparison, so a little bit unfortunate for Cavalcade in that sense. Alright, hopefully you can see the leaderboard on screen there, and now we're starting to form a list. We're starting to really get through them. I'm really excited to see what happens in the next 10 to 15 movies, who prevails, who's going to be on top, especially as we hit the 40s and 50s and 60s. And so with that, crew, please subscribe, please comment, please like the video, and if you stuck around this far, I really appreciate it. You're absolutely awesome, and I hope you're coming along on this journey with me. Until next time, thanks crew. I'm not a critic, just someone who loves film.